host Bastien Dolla, co-founder at Rayon. Personally, I've used Rayon and the UI UX is amazing. The interface, the whole app experience, even the graphics quality to the point. Like kudos, you guys, you've done amazing work in building the whole platform. So I thought it would be great to hear Bastian's journey about developing Rayon, how it started, and everything around it. So thanks a lot for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me and thanks for the kind words. So, where should we start?
So first of all, like for people who are watching, can you tell a bit about your background, where you grew up, and your career highlights?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm French. I'm an engineer with a background in mathematics and physics. But actually, I started my career as a civil servant in public housing, transportation, urbanism. So I worked for the French government for almost 10 years, doing a lot of stuff there. And then in 2015, I decided that this was not, my whole life, and I wanted to go back to more technological stuff and entrepreneurship. So I co-founded a first startup called Avix. It was a co-housing platform. Did this for almost 6 years. And then during that time, I learned a lot about technology, but also architecture because we were designing floor plans for our customers. And at that point, it was super clear to me that what has happened for interface designs through tools like Figma, of course, but also the way we use GitHub in code software engineering, the same kind of revolution should happen in the AEC industry. And it was very shocking to see in one room, I had architects, I had a team of 5 architects working on floor plans on AutoCAD and Revit mostly. And on the other room, I had engineers and product managers, and they were working on Figma, GitHub, Slack, and being way more efficient. I was starting to wonder why is this? And at the same time, we were doing research on how algorithm could design a floor plan because we had to design a ton of floor plans. And we wrote a research paper on it. And I stumbled upon the research of a guy at Boston that was doing research on GAN and floor plan. I was, wow, that was interesting. And I reached out to him, and his name was Stanislas Chailloux. And I discovered that he was French, and we kind of hit it off. We discussed a lot together. We did the side project together about an exhibit in AI in architecture in Paris
Oh,
in March 2020, just before the pandemic. So we did this opening of this exhibit in Paris. It was a huge success, but 5 days later we were confined to our apartments. But that actually gave us an opportunity to think about AI architecture and globally the tool that people use to design in the AEC. And we thought, okay, that's the existing software is not the future in our mind. So who is building the future? And we thought we could do it. So 1 year later, we just decided to join and create Rayon and go full steam ahead.
it's actually I'm aware about this exhibit. I saw online the videos, and it was like
Nice.
very well curated, and there's like cutting edge work displayed. So
Yeah, I mean, it was all Stanislas, to be honest, and he did an amazing job.
see, Sebastian, like so in 2021, yeah, like the conversations were going between you and Stanislas, and you decided in 2021, like let's go full time. From that idea, okay, you could do a lot of things with AI in architecture, interior design, and like you can use a lot of cutting edge tech. How did you like narrow down the idea or
Yeah.
whatever the things you discussed and till timeline for your first MVP?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thanks to the exhibit, we had the opportunity to talk with many people, architects, of course, but also people working in the real estate industry at large. And the more we talked with people, the more we realized that first AI, was not high up on their priority list. If you look at their problems, it had a lot to do with coordination, um, a lot of time lost building render and documents. And so we thought, okay, maybe what we actually need to do is build an editor tool from the ground up, not just an AI plugin to go on top of the incumbent software. So that was our first kind of insights that if we want to really nail this and enable an AI powered workflow tomorrow, you actually had to rebuild from scratch the whole editor. And then the second insight that we had was that most people we talked to actually worked mainly in 2D. So, of course, there is for complex projects, complex BIM with Revit, Archicad, and so forth. But a lot of people just were working in 2D for a lot of different use cases. And we thought, okay, maybe that's what we should do. Focus on 2D, focus on building a new paradigm for an editor that could rival AutoCAD in that sense. And then once we have done this, we can layer up the AI layer on top of it. That was really the idea. And so that's what we set up to do. We started in fall of 2021, and it took us, I would say, almost a year to come up with a prototype that was working really well. And so we had the opportunity to raise money thanks to that, and then build up a team. And then we did, the first version of Rayon that we launched in June. Then we raised another round of financing, get even more people in the team. And now we're really building toward the second version of Rayon that's going to be really more powerful and with more feature as well.
That's amazing. So almost a year, and like a fundamental or uh
Yeah, we have
is is one
uh,
of your.
yeah, Fundamental is one of our investors. It's kind of the main investor in Rayon with Northzone. So yeah, we have them from the start. They were at the pre-seed.
Yeah,
Yeah, with Seedcamp and Northzone and 20 VCs were our three main investors at the pre-seed, and then Northzone and Fundamental did the seed round.
yeah. And like I remember, like I watched Patrick's analysis on the industry and his thoughts, and in one of his article he says like the minimum feature set for a new 2D or 3D CAD is very high because a
Yeah.
lot of geometry things. That's why to build that prototype or first functional version it takes a lot of efforts. uh, so I was curious, like how did you prioritize what features to develop and like really focus.
This is a very important point because it's really hard to get going, and I think this is one of the reasons why we have like so few software, and they've been in there for a long time because they've been almost there since personal computers arrived. Um, and the reason is that it's quite hard to build, and it's especially hard to build if you want to have the same level of performance. And so we thought about this, and one thing that we were convinced about is that if you look at Figma success, for example, and I'm old enough to have known the past before Figma, where we were doing even when we were using Photoshop to do interface design. And I think the one thing they did was to demonstrate that you could have a professional app in the browser that was pro as good quality as a desktop app from Adobe. And I think apart from Google Suite was also very good at that. It was almost the first time that happened. That professional people that were kind of always sneering on the web. This is for this is not serious. Um, and I think the reason they succeeded is that they really put a very high quality bar in engineering,
Mm,
and it took a long time. It took 5 years for Figma to have their first revenue, and I think 7 years to get to 1 million of IR. So it took them a long time to do it, but they did it well, and we are really inspired by that. So coming back to your question, so I think the first thing we thought about was we're going to need to build something very strong. So it's going to take a long time because we're going to build our own renderer, we're going to build our own geometry kernel, we're going to build our own multiplayer system, and we need to own all those layers because this is the only way you're going to make something very fast for a domain. And we did that, so it took some time for that. But then when it comes to pure features of the product, we realized that it was going to be super hard to make people that have been using AutoCAD for 20 years switch. And that's understandable because you know the tool, you're used to the tool, You're not going to switch like this. But we also discovered that there were so many people that were drawing flow plans that were not using a tool like that. They were using PowerPoints. They were using uh, general vector graphics tools such as Illustrator, Figma. They were using Miro. They were using different tools, and they were in need of something made for the built world. And we decided to start with them because it was much easier to get them to try the tool and to use it. And so the feature set that we started with was smaller as well, because those people were looking for simplicity and not not the thousands of commands that you have in AutoCAD. They don't need that. And so we started like this, and then slowly going up the expert chain, I would say, getting more and more expert people to use the tool. So that's how we're thinking about this.
That's really smart. Like we're using that cohort who already have like very less feature requirements and so solving that problem. I forgot to ask, like you mentioned about your housing company in 2015. Like you did it for 6 years. What were like the exit for that, and what were the lessons you learned in that journey, which were applicable in doing Rayon?
Yeah. So, it's often said that you learn from your mistakes. So I learned a lot from that experience. Um, so yeah, I mean, it didn't end up in a happy manner, unfortunately, because COVID was kind of the last nail on the coffin of that project. Because basically real estate stopped, and we could not keep going. Um, but it taught me so much, and I think it taught me first about the tools people use in the industry, and we were working a lot with architects on the one hand, but also real estate developers a lot on the other hand. They were building the buildings basically, and it was so interesting to see all those people working on apartments, floor plans, using PDFs or even AutoCAD, sometimes not being able to open AutoCAD files, and they want to be able to measure stuff, to comment. So they would ask the architect, can you just measure this? So they would write an email to say, can you measure the distance between the door? And so it's it's really inefficient. So I think that was a big learning, but and also it learned, I learned a lot about building a company, uh, building a great team, and also you know building a product that is really need from people. That's the classic mistake first time founder make, which is they kind of think about a solution and they go looking for somebody that has a problem. We really try to do the opposite at Rayon, and we think, what's a problem people have, let's build the best solution we can for that problem, and then just move from there. And I think that's really, really something key. And I had to learn it the hard way.
Mm, building things people love is it's
Yeah,
easy
it's
to say,
so
it's very difficult to crack.
exactly. It's something that is so simple and understandable, but it's so hard to not to be able to not do what you think you should do and really listen to the market, to users, because we hold, and I think we did it with Rayon because at first we really wanted to do an AI play. That was our idea. We wanted to do AI, and that lesson I learned from my previous experience really taught me, no, this is not what people want. No, especially coming from generative design, where you had all those projects where you push a button and you have like 10,000 layouts for your parameters, and you can just do an analysis on them. We knew that was not something that actually really worked because it doesn't really answer a problem people have, and or very few people have that problems actually. So yeah, we try to always think about this.
Mm, I see. And if you were to travel back in time, 2021 fall, where you were initially prototyping Rayon, how does a day in your life look like there that time and now? Like, what's the difference?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, at that time it was super simple. We were only two person in the company, so the day would look like we were coding and designing a lot. Usually Stan would be the one designing the product, the interface, thinking about the features we would do. Then we would discuss them, and I would be the one coding. That was kind of our tasks. So yeah, that was it. Now we're 15 in the team, so we work as a team way more, which is great. But still, I mean, the core of what we do is quite the same. Thinking about the product, we we talk a lot more with our users because we have a lot more users. We have a lot more data, but it's still the same idea. Think about it, improve, and we are very we're very product driven company, so we spend a lot of time building and iterating on the product. That's really the core of what we do. We don't have a sales team. We are doing what you would call PLG motion. So we don't.
Like
We are
growth.
very 100% focused on the product.
Nice. So, like, building on that, like, can you share like a bit about your culture of the company, how decisions are made, how people brainstorm, and
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a very once again, we're a small team, so it's very simple. We try, so we're a remote company, so that has a few consequences. The first one is that we have kind of a senior team, and I would say a senior mentality where people have a lot of ownership and are autonomous. That is very important to us. Uh, and also it means that it's a very horizontal structure. We don't have, apart from the founders, there is no management in place. People can talk with anyone. It's really free. People can tackle the problems they want. So we try to work it like this a lot. And I think the other part of the culture is that we really value deep work. We think that we are solving hard problems, and to solve hard problems, you need a lot of quiet time. So we do as little meeting as we can, and people get a lot of time on their hand to really think about the problem and try to solve it. So that's kind of, I would say, that kind of the culture at Rayon, and we do value very complex and hard problems. So we have a very engineering, I think, culture as well. But we also have, I think, a culture where we value, aesthetics and ergonomics, and Stan brings that a lot in the team. We think one of the things we were convinced from the get-go was, architects, they're, one of the part of the work is building something beautiful and something that people will feel comfortable in. And architects are very focused on aesthetics. They are very cultivated people, and their tools do not reflect that, I think.
mm,
And we thought, we want to be the tool that actually reflect that. That should reflect the values that our users also care about, and they care about aesthetics, they care about economics. So that's also a big part of our culture.
yeah, and I can attest, like, I could validate that I could see it in the product that I used it, and it's the graphics tells that story. So, can you share a bit about like hiring? Like, how do you hire? Like,
Yeah.
because for startups in the AC tech, there's always like this dilemma. Okay, do you hire architects who know coding, or AC tech who know coding, or you found software background? Like the pros and cons with each. So, how
Yeah.
do you?
So I think, first and foremost, we're looking for highly talented people. So I mean, that's of course a given. But when it comes to engineering, it's quite hard to build a vector graphics, performance tool. It's not something that a lot of people have done. So we look in the software engineering part of things for people that have that ability. They don't really need to have that experience because, once again, very few people have that experience, but they need to have that ability. And so that means a deep understanding of software engineering, a deep understanding of geometry. So we look for that first, I think, for the engineering part. And if that person can have an interest in architecture, that's even better, of course. But first, they need to be able to actually code the thing. For the product side, of course, it's quite different. We look for people that have a very good understanding of what it means to design a creative tool, because it's a very hard product problem as well in terms of economics. And once again, if they have knowledge of the industry, that's a bonus. But first, we look for people that really know how to build a tool. That's really important to us, because we already have some insight in the industry. Stan, of course, is an architect, so he knows pretty well the industry. So it's more important for us to have people that can actually deliver on the quality of the tools. And it's true that if you look at people that have built design tools, you're going to find more people coming from general vector graphics
Mm,
companies, and rather than people coming from, I mean, the CAD companies, because those companies are quite old, and especially when you're doing a web tool, it's like not the same culture at all. So it's not easy. So yeah, so that's kind of the way we do it. But I mean, the main thing is getting people that are really, they want to learn, they want to be very proficient at what they do. Uh, they're not afraid of having ownership.
nice. Do you think like getting those highly talented people also comes at a premium of high salary? So how do you?
Yeah. So so sure. I mean, it can. So we try. We're a European company, so we and I think a lot has changed in the past. I think in the past year there was some. I think compensation were going a bit crazy at some point, and in my experience, not always reflective of the talent of the individual. Uh, Probably more reflective of his ability to negotiate and find the best, US based company that is willing to pay a lot. But what is true though is that we would rather pay a premium for a very talented individual rather than pay less for somebody that would be mediocre. That's, because the impact of a great individual is can be 10, 100-fold. But we also try to be reasonable because at the end of the day, and we've succeeded. I mean, we have some great, amazing talent in the company. We pay high salaries to be clear, but we're happy with what we've put in place.
God, do you
And,
have
and, I,
any?
and, I, and I have to say something that is very important is that if you're working on very hard problems and you have a good culture, technical culture, and a very good technical stack, people will actually be willing to get a significant pay cut to work with you. And people have done that because, at Rayon, they will have the impact they want. They will be able to participate in the creation of a new design tool, and they will be working in a very state-of-the-art environment. And we can talk about this more if you want. But so that's also one of the reasons we managed to attract very talented people.
Nice. Because yeah, I think apart from salary, like like at work, motivation, impact, and working on interesting problems also excites people. So it
Yeah.
could have like if you communicate that in the product you're building during that candidate interview, like they are happy to compromise. So I could understand what you're saying. Do you have any story where you made a feature or there was a bug and you like worked late night, solved it, and you had like great satisfying or gratification moment?
Yeah, I mean, we have a ton of stories like that. Especially at the beginning, we had our first clients quite early on, and the product was at the beginning. So, and um, I mean, the cardinal sin when you're building a cloud-based tool is losing the user data.
Mm,
So if somebody works for 3 hours and they lose their data, that's really, really bad. So at Rayon, it's like one of our highest priorities that this can never ever happen. Um, Unfortunately, at the beginning, it happened, and it happened twice to the same person.
ooh,
So we worked really hard to try to get back his data as best we could. He was, the user was furious, and he had every right to be. But in the end, he stick with us, and he's, I think, one of our strongest, ambassador today. So yeah, that was one of the story where if somebody loses their work, it's all hands on deck to get it back. Um, Hopefully today we have a way stronger and way more robust stack, so this doesn't happen anymore. And also we have tens of thousands of users, so it's way more battle tasted than it was before.
I see. So, yeah, and in your like coding journey, what has been like? It must have been like a ride of ups and downs of developing the
Yeah,
product. Like
yeah. I
any
mean,
stories? Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a good point. So first of all, we write most of the code of Rayon in Rust, which is
Mm,
kind of a new, recent language, I would say. So when we were thinking about the idea of Rayon, I started to learn Rust, and start coding in it. And also, I knew that we had to build our own renderer because I felt like this was the only way we're going to make something really performant. Um, and so I had to learn computer graphics as well, which is a very technical and hard field. So, I mean, yeah, it was hard, but it was super exciting. And something, that is always, that I strongly believe in is that, sometimes people say we did it not because it was easy, but because we thought it was going to be easy. And I think that's really something that is really true. Like at some point to really tackle such an ambitious project, you need to have some kind of ignorance in a way, because otherwise you would just not do it. Like if you had the perfect knowledge of exactly what needs to be done to succeed, you would say no, no way I'm going to do that. So when I look back on the journey and there was some kind of naiveness in the beginning, but now I'm super happy that we did it. It was tough, but we are. I think we are almost finished the strong foundational bricks of the core software, and from there we're going to be able to build way more.
Yeah, because I can tell as an engineer that that is an exciting thing to develop because okay, it's a
Yeah,
new language.
and
But
also you have this kind of I mean, of course people that have done it before are way more and efficient, and I love nothing more than to recruit somebody that is way better than me at some part of the app. That's one of my most important criteria. Like if I don't learn something from somebody that I'm interviewing, I'm like, no, because I'm not that good. So they should be way better than me. And I've had the chance to recruit people like that, and it's amazing. And so now that I see, when I come across some code that I've wrote more than 2 years ago, I'm like, now I see, and it's always improving. But I mean, that's part of the journey.
yeah, the code is getting rusted. You gotta improve.
Yeah, and also I think personally I've improved a lot. I've wrote a lot of code, so maybe probably like 200,000 lines. So I mean, at some point you improve as well.
Yeah,
It's logical.
I see. I thought you would say, "Oh, when I interview, someone beats me in video game, and that's a good candidate to
Yeah,
have."
yeah, exactly.
No, but that's amazing. And so you develop these features. One thing I was curious because as founder, you make decisions about okay, should you build something from scratch or you adopt a library? And especially if you're starting with Rust, the ecosystem is still developing. There are not libraries or packages built as you have in JavaScript or other languages.
Yeah,
So how do you like navigate in this kind of scenario?
yeah, it's a great question. So I think it really depends on the matter. I would say that if you can use something off the shelf, it's often the best. It's 90% the best solution, because you will tend to underestimate the work needed, not just to make something work, but to make it robust. And there's like those 10%, 20% between something that works and something that is robust. That's where you're going to lose months. So in the one hand, I think if you can get something off the shelf, you should. Let me give you an example, like Boolean path operation, for example. That's a very hard problem to crack and to do it really well. It's not that hard to do, a half job on it. And what's really hard is to make it work on the millions of edge cases that come up in a floating point precision environment. And so if you can use a library from that, it's way better. But on the other hand, if you don't build it internally, at some point you will hit like a wall that will stop you from progressing. So it's always a trade-off. So
Mm,
you have to, and I think the best way to do it is start off with the library, but in a way that you can build your own at some point. And you
yeah.
will very rarely do.
Mm. That's a great point. Any other like suggestion or tips for like for people who are interested in like computer graphics learning and who are interested in web apps?
Yeah, I mean, I think my advice would be, especially in the field of architecture, is that you really need to just do it. Like, Often I meet people that don't, they hesitate to actually learn it and try to do it themselves. And I think they should really try it, and they will find that it's not as hard as they thought for some point, maybe harder for the other point, but at least you learn, and the more you do, the more you learn, and it's the only way you can recruit talented people. So, for example, I mean, I could, I was a civil servant for 10 years, so nothing to do with technology. I barely used any computers at all, maybe only Word because I was writing speeches or notes. Um, but I thought that the only way I could do a technological company was if I learned to code. Um, and it was a lot of work, but in retrospect, the people I hired today would never have come work for Rayon if they felt like I didn't understand the core principles of what we do. And great people only want to work with people they respect. So yeah, my advice would be if you're not technical, you either need a very technical co-founder or you need to learn it. And I would suggest to learn it either way, because that's really, really important if that's the field you're on.
Any particular book, YouTube channel, or course you recommend?
I mean, not really. I think there are so much material online now. It's amazing. Uh, when I was a teenager in the 90s, there was nothing. So you couldn't learn anything. You had to book like O'Reilly books. Now you have, I don't know how many courses, Stanford, MIT, everything is online. You can do
Yeah.
some courses. So there is no excuse really. You can really learn it. All the software, the open source, it's just amazing. One of the best way for me to learn is actually to read the code
Mm.
in open source. Like you can read the Open NURBS library from Rhino and McNeil and just look how it's done, try to understand. I think that's amazing. And so you can really do it that way. And sometimes people don't realize that it's not that hard, that you can actually look at the code base and understand. You just need to do it.
I see. Uh, right now, Rayon has a lot of users in from 2021 to till this date. What has been the most challenging part in terms of product and in terms of engineering?
So in terms of product, I think the main thing is really to pick the right feature on the roadmap. That's really hard because the feature set is huge, and you need to think it's very hard to know what feature is going to make a difference, because of course people are going to ask for everything, but in the end they won't use everything. They really need some features, not others. So that's really hard. That's the core of product. I would say, and also, we really want to nail down the product vision in which we can address non-experts, but also experts in some sense. So you need to find the right abstractions and ergonomics so people to serve both of those needs. And it's super important for us because in the AEC industry there is so much collaboration between experts and non-experts that they need to have the same tool. Otherwise, you fall back on PDF and you're back to square one. So we really think a lot about that. How you can get a tool that is easy to use for some, that has a lot of power under the pedal for the experts. I think that's the biggest challenge. And in terms of engineering, I think there were a lot of challenges, but the two biggest one are building a multiplayer real-time tool. That's really hard because you need to really understand how the data layer will be impacted by multiplayer real-time modification mutations. So it's quite interesting, but there is all this literature on CRDT and operational transform and so forth that you have to kind of read to understand how to build something robust. And the second one is just being able to have good performance in the browser, especially since from day one, we knew it was going to be key to be able to import existing CAD files. And as you may know, people draw crazy models in AutoCAD, like crazy stuff, millions of lines. We had some of our users, they import a building, maybe there is 10 floors, all of them layouts next to one another in AutoCAD. And if you zoom in on the elevator, there is going to be every single screw design. If you zoom in on every window, it's taken from the constructor, so you have all the screws. So it's like millions of lines. It's crazy. And to be able to have something like that work well in the browser is very challenging. And that's why we built our own renderer. That's why we built it in Rust, compiled to WebAssembly. But the memory consumption, you don't have a lot of budget per frame. So being able to render everything under a few milliseconds, that's really hard. So we work a lot on that.
Bastian, I must tell, like all the things you're doing is like cutting edge and with the best tech, like from Rust to compiling on the browser to even like you mentioned about CRDT and writing your own kernel. It's a lot of work and it's quite challenging. And I, I was curious, like if you were to like say, how do you like do planning and KPIs for your product? So
Yeah. So
what
so
does
I
success look
yeah.
like?
So the first thing I would say is that I think people always overestimate how they can what they can build in 1 year, but also really underestimate what they can build in 10 years. So something might look very, very hard if you look at a 1 year span, and it's true that you're never going to build this in 1 year. It's not possible. But you can do a lot of stuff in 10 years. If you keep incrementing and building on top of what you built, then you can go very, very far. Um, so going back to the roadmap, um, I truly believe that there should be kind of two roadmaps. And the first one is not really a roadmap; it's like a master plan that you have in your mind, which is basically where you want to end up in 10 years. So it's like your North Star in a way. You want to build that product, and then the roadmap itself should be, in my mind, it should only be around 3 months, not much more, because you're not going to be able to have any um, successful planning over that period of time. Because I mean, the only way you're going to be able to plan precisely more than that is if it's something you've already done. If you already built a CAD tool, then maybe you can do that. But if you've never done it, it's impossible. You won't know if it takes 3 months or 6 months or a year. It's impossible to know. So what we try to do is a rolling roadmap every quarter, and really focus on those next 3 months. And there you can really build, comprehensive roadmap. And when you talk to VCs, they often ask about the roadmap. And I mean, I would be very curious to look at the roadmaps in the different decks, where people say that we're going to do this in quarter and this and this and this. What they actually built in the end, probably 1/10 of what they thought they could do.
I see. Yeah, that's very interesting approach. Having to like it
And
makes a lot of
yeah,
sense.
and also going back to the products. The problem with having a roadmap, it you have the temptation to do your roadmap, and you should really get feedback from the users, and what you think should be done in 6 month times is probably not what you're going to actually need to do if you really listen to the feedback. So it's
Mm,
also dangerous to have like a plan, and be very scholar. Okay, I'm going to do this, because you don't know what you should be doing. You need to adapt, all the time. Otherwise, you're going to miss out on a lot of opportunities. So I think it's also dangerous to have this very set idea on what you need to build. You should, take it. I think 3 months period is a good period. Like every 3 months, you can reevaluate and do your roadmap.
yeah, yeah. Because like you need to have balance because there might be few team members who need like clear direction. What we're gonna focus on monthly plans, and there are some team members okay, we'll go with the flow, and we want to listen and adapt. So having a healthy balance
Yeah.
really, yeah. And uh, can you share a bit like how much you're free open to share like a bit about the tech stack and the nerdy viewers like
Yeah,
what are
sure,
the
sure.
cool things you're building?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I'm fairly open about the tech stack. So we were very inspired by Figma, in a way. So we built our architecture in kind of the same way, which means that we have a core engine which is written in Rust. That includes our own custom renderer in WebGL. That includes our whole game engine that is written with an ECS, which is called Entity Component System, pretty much like a game. That also includes all our data layer, how stuff is synced and resolved. And then on top of this, we built a UI that is really a React app, very similar to what you would find in most websites. One specific thing is that we rely a lot on finite state machines, especially because commands in a CAD tool are pretty much finite state machines. A command has going to have different states, and for each state, it's going to need to respond differently to the events that it gets from the user: click event, mouse events, keyboard events. So we use a lot of finite state machine, and we rely on a library called xstate for that in TypeScript. And then on the back end, we have like two separate backends. We have a very simple, I would say, vanilla GraphQL backend, very similar to what a lot of companies would have, on top of a Postgres DB. And then we have a specific multiplayer backend, which is way more similar to what a game would have, like an online game would have, where people can connect to the same server and have the state checked and synchronized in real time.
I see. Amazing. In a lot of the things you have developed from scratch, any like things you built on top of any libraries?
Yeah, I mean, we do use a lot of libraries. On the backend side, we use an orchestration service made by a company called Drifting in Space, and the service is called JamSocket, which is really amazing. So that's what we use to spin up our own services for the real-time multiplayer experience. So we built on top of that. We didn't build our own orchestration. So we use that. We also use Lightblocks for the cursors, but only for the presents. Very great library as well. Awesome library. Something that's a good example of something that we could have built ourselves, but that's exactly what we need. We built it very well. We can just use that. So we also use that, and then of course, many libraries, many open source libraries. But I have to say that the more we go on in the domain part of thing, the less library we use. So we're
Mm,
really going to build our own geometry library. Once again, we built our own renderer from scratch. We have absolutely no dependencies. And the reason for that is if you want to have performance, you will need to build something that is very domain specific, because this is the only way you're going to get performance. There is no free lunch. There is no silver bullet. Something that works well for in a certain case is not going to work perfectly for your CAD drawings that are very specific. So yeah, going forward, you would find yourself using less and less external libraries, I think.
I see. And like that brings on the question I have is about it's the lightest CAD. Like how do you like identify the object schema? And you mentioned about ECS, like what are the
Yeah.
entities? It would have been a lot of like whiteboarding about okay what
Yeah,
are
I
the
mean, for sure, and but also the way to do it is just to put one foot in front of the other. Um, so for the schema, we didn't think about the perfect schema from the get go, and this is what we're going to do. We just built the simplest one we could, and then go from there and iterate and improve and improve. So there's always going to be a tension between trying to do the best thing and kind of think about the future and just do the stuff and then iterate and improve. I think, yeah, it's what matters is actually to get the thing going and get people to use it. So we didn't spend a month writing the specs of a new format, and no, that's not what we did. And actually, I think if we had done that, that would have been a mistake because we didn't really know what could be the end result. So we built something fast. It was JSON based, and now we actually know because there is more stability as you go along. And we rebuilt our complete format using flat buffers, which is a protocol for serialization that is really nice. So now we have a very strong format for the models, but also the thinking mechanism, the payload that you send over the wire for the multiple edits.
Mm, I see. any tips or tricks or hacks you did to save some compute cost or server cost to make it like more efficient?
I mean, I'm not sure. So the as a startup, we have the credits offered by all the providers, so we don't need to over optimize on this. Uh, no, I think what is true though is that we do have a culture of performance, and Rust really helped for that because when you're a Rust developers, I think performance and memory is something you're very aware of, which is not always the case when you come from a script language such as JavaScript. So I think we do have that culture that if something doesn't need to allocate, it should not allocate. If something can be faster, it should be faster. So we try to do that without over engineering as well. And also we have a serverless architecture, so we really only need to spin up servers when they're needed. So that also helps a lot, I think. So yeah, one other thing also we realized quite early on was that the model of the data of the model, sorry, was very local to the users in the sense that when you're working on a drawing, you don't really interact with the other drawings. So that data being very local, the appropriate database for that is actually a file.
Mm,
And I'm pretty sure that's what Figma is doing as well. And by doing that, you save a ton in database storage and compute because files are very cheap. You can have blob storage that you can store them in. You can duplicate them very fast. So I think that architecture was key to having something that scales very well. And when we went from a couple of hundred users to uh, a couple of tens of thousands of users, it went very smoothly because of that.
that's a great insight. If you were at a university and you were to teach something for the next generation of AEC students, what course would you teach?
Oh, me? I don't know if I'm eligible for any course, to be honest, but uh,
You have a lot
uh,
of experience in
yeah,
things you are doing.
yeah. I mean, I could teach about engineering in the AC world. What I would learn. Um, that could be one thing. So yeah, something like that, I would say. And also geometry is something I like a lot. I was doing a lot of math in my studies and then none. So I kind of went back to that initial love, and geometry is really amazing. So I love that. Geometric algorithm uh, are very interesting.
I know you mentioned in the start of the company was like a lot of AI driven and that excitement, and you found a problem. What are your current thoughts on like LLM, multimodal, and like industry native AI?
I mean, like everyone, I think it's fascinating, and it's clearly super interesting to know where this is going to end up. But I think the following, in my mind, I when I look at the use cases that really work, I feel they always have a common something that is they solve a problem that is hard to do, but very easy to check. And I think that's very important. Like if you take an image generation, for example, it's very hard to generate an image from scratch. Like you can go into Photoshop. It's not easy to do that, but it's very easy to judge an image, to look at the image and say, oh, this is not a good image. This is a bad image. That doesn't look right. And I think those kinds of problems are very well suited to this current state of AI. And in contrast, if I take another problem, which is something that is not that hard to do, but very hard to check. For example, a floor plan. A floor plan is not very hard to draw, to be honest. You can do it. You need some knowledge, but it's not as hard as crafting a beautiful drawing, for example. But checking that a floor plan is correct, that's not easy, because you can make subtle mistake, and it's ingress, for example, building codes, stuff like that. It's a centimeter and it's not correct. So I think it's a hard problem for AI because you get into a situation where what is generated is actually harder to check than actually to draw from scratch.
Mm,
So it's hard to find it. So I think this is where we are at the moment. Uh, I am pretty sure that things are going to evolve, and that might not be true in a few months' time, or even maybe a few years' time. But right now, I would we try to focus on the problem I mentioned, things that are hard to do but easy to check. So that way, you can get into those iteration loop for the users. The AI, suggests something. Oh, I can immediately know if it's good or not. I can discard it if it's not. I can ask him again, or if it's good, I'm done. So that's, I think, the right problems for the solution we have today.
I see. So does that imply into like real time checks when you're drawing elements and like recommendations as an assistant?
So we're not. So that's another problem. And so for example, checks. It's something I worked on previously a lot. There was at some point these ideas that since you had a BIM model, you could then have all the building codes kind of in the machine, and it will check everything. I've written a bunch of code myself when I was working in government. So I know that these things, first of all, are very hard to maintain because they change all the time, every month almost in France, and also um, they're not always easy to apply because they might be, I don't know the right word, but they can be fuzzy in the sense that they might not be a correct answer if you look at the code itself. So it's really hard to do. And it's hard to do for every country in the world.
Yeah.
And the one thing about software is that I do believe that to build a software company, you need a global scale. Otherwise, the unit economics are not there. So I, when I put all this together, I think this is not the field that would be the easiest. And when you think about companies like Flux, even Spacemaker, they kind of all hit that problem that what they did in certain countries would not work in others, and the work needed to manually have all the parameters right for every country is so huge. You need to update it always that it's hard. So yeah, checks are very complicated in that sense. And the last thing I would say about checks is also to work, you need a context that is very rich. If you look, for example, at the building codes for commercial real estate, there are many things that depend on the activity, on the kind of building, the year it's been built, the city. So all this context has to be entered at some point. And sometimes it can feel very overwhelming to have to input all those parameters, and it creates this vastly complex interface. So automatic checks are very hard. That's my kind of point. So yeah, that's not what we're working on. What we're working on is more um, artistic capabilities and creativity, because this is really interesting. It helps people have ideas. It helps people do stuff that is very hard to do by hand, like adding some details, adding some colors, all this stuff. And I think AI works really well for that specific use case. Another use case that I think is very promising is image generation. So we are 2D tool at Rayon, but we do know that people sometimes need 3D, especially when they want to do renders for their clients, and when they want to have some kind of perspective of what the space could be. And my conviction is that we are going to be able to offer at some point those features not by becoming a 3D tool, but rather by incorporating um, image generation software through AI that will be able to do a photorealistic render of this particular room with this particular kind of idea. Maybe you would put a mood board, some kind of geometry, but very basic, and then you can adjust and it's done. So in 10 minutes, you could have a photorealistic render of the space. And if you had to actually model it in 3D, in SketchUp or in Blender, and I've done a ton of Blender in my time, and I really love Blender, by the way, that would take expert level knowledge and it would take you days. So that's really one of my convictions that, yeah, we're going to see a huge change in the way people do 3D renders, and it's going to be way more AI based, that's for sure.
Oh, that's a great point, because if you have like the 2D layout and you can like, okay, floor plan wall, and you get some insight, you can use that for the image generation, and that helps
Exactly.
make client decision faster. And get most. And now I've seen also like the mid journey moment for video, where you can upload a video and
Yeah,
then making
exactly.
panoramic or walkthrough video. Then
Exactly,
uh,
and yeah, and that can suggest, a lot of our users are interior designers, and having the ability to suggest inspirations, mood boarding that is really tuned to the floor plan they're drawing. That's really useful for them. So we think AI can really help there.
yeah, like when you mention about the scaling and the regional problem, I thought you also face it in kind of for your CAD assets, where you can have generic chair which works
Yeah,
for most of the countries, but also there are hyper local chair which you
yeah.
need. So how do you tackle that?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I think I think in a sense, the very nice thing about current state of AI is that the prompt and having text as an input is really general, and it can really adapt to your problem. And I really love that, because one thing we're convinced at Rayon is that we want to build a general tool. That's really important, and that's important for two things. First of all, we think that you need to have a big market to succeed, and so you don't want to end up in a small vertical where your price point is very high, and we would rather have a more general tool that is cheaper, so a lot of people can experience it. And the second thing is that people change careers, and they will build commercial real estate, then they will do residential, and they need to do a bowling alley in the building, they will need to do a bar, I don't know, anything. So if you build a two vertical tool that can only do, for example, apartments, or that can only do offices, people will hit a dead end at some point, and they don't want to learn five different tools. So being general, I think it's a huge advantage, and I think that, by the way, that has been AutoCAD advantage for a long time. So we want to be very general, and I think that's a great thing about AI, is that it's made to generalize. So I think we will want to keep that. You can, low level tools that you can use the way you want to use them. Maybe you're going to do a block, but that block can be anything you want it to be. We don't want to have like a chair semantic object that can, because, what about a sitting chair, or maybe a longer chair? It can sometimes be almost a bed. We don't know. So yeah, I think keeping it general, it's very important to us.
Got it. We are towards the end of the interview. I want to do a rapid fire, and we'll have like 5 or 10 seconds and super quick answer.
Okay.
So, your role model.
Oh, my role model. I don't know if I have one, to be honest. Um, I don't really have a role model, but there is somebody that I really admire, and I read a lot about him in France. It's called Jean Moulin. It's like a hero of the French resistance, and that's somebody I really admire.
I see. Your favorite movie.
My favorite movie. Wow, those are. uh, oh wow! I've seen so many movies. That's a really hard question. I don't think I have a favorite movie, but I can tell you some recent movie that I really like. Um, the recent one I've watched quite recently was called Whiplash. It's about a drum player. Really
Yeah,
like that
it's
one.
a good.
So
It's
just
a good.
at the top of my head, yeah, it was one of the good movie I watched recently.
I see. A city you wanna retire.
Sorry, I didn't get it.
A city you want to retire.
Oh, so I want to be by the sea. So that's the main criteria when I retire. So probably in the southeast of France. So
Nice.
it could be Nice, for example, or a city not far from Nice.
I see. Are you okay? Actually, I had one question, but I forgot about it. Your favorite architecture tool apart from Rayon?
Yeah, yeah. Let me think about that. I mean, for me personally, I would say Blender, because that's the one I've been using a lot. and I think it has a lot. When it comes to 3D, I think it's very very powerful. But I'm not an architect, so that might be why I'm saying this. I mean, Rhino is great as well. I mean, obviously.
Yeah. Your favorite architecture building?
Oh, um, so I just came back from Barcelona, so I have to say that La Sagrada Familia is just it blew my mind that this was conceived so long ago. It's just for me, it's the most impressive building I've ever seen.
Yeah. Okay. Bastian, anything which we didn't cover in this interview and you want to share on an ending note?
I mean, I hope that if what we do at Rayon can inspire other people to just get to work and do it. One quote I really like is that success is 80% of success is just getting showing up. I truly believe that. I think sometimes people will be scared of not being able to do the thing, doing the thing that sucks, and it will suck at the beginning. But if you just keep going, then it will work. And we always tend to overestimate how good other people are and underestimate how good we can get in a few years. So I would say to people, if you think you can do it, just do it. Don't be scared, and you will succeed.
Yes. I have one last question. If I were to ask your friends and family three words that describe Bastian, what would that be?
It's like is this an interview, a job interview? No, I mean I don't know. Maybe 3 words is too much, but I think they would say that I'm a very passionate, um, that I really work a lot. They would probably say that. Uh, and what would they say? Uh, that I have. I'm very determined.
Those are the great qualities of a founder. So yeah, you're meant
I hope they
for
will say I'm
startups.
nice as well, but
All right, Bastian. It was lovely hosting you on my
all
show
right.
with so many
Thanks.
great insights.
Have a good one, Mayur. Thanks for having me.
Bye bye.